Hello and welcome to the Supreme Leader podcast. It's August 2022. Today we're going to talk about an interesting topic. Why do we marry? The family is a pillar of civilization. It's a feature of most social animals in a sense. Gorillas live in small patriarchal-led groups, dogs have had their alphas, and most swans choose a mate which they keep for the rest of their lives regardless of whether their partner dies or not. They remain faithful in their way. Humans are different. We don't seem to have an inborn natural family structure, necessarily. We had to find our own. In modernity, we see growing numbers of children being raised by people in polyandrous relationships, by same-sex couples, by foster parents, by heterosexuals who simply do not wish to get married at the moment, and so on. Yet, in the West, increasingly fewer children are being raised by heterosexuals who are married. Whereas if we look at the past, in any Western country, in fact, the vast majority of people were raised by one father and one mother who were married and lived together. This article is not really about how or why this changed or is changing as we speak, as its reasons are many and often self-evident and probably need to be dissected in isolation in order to give them their deserved gravity. This article is about why, on the whole, one man, one woman being together in a sexually exclusive relationship thing we call traditional marriage came into being in the first place, according to the anthropological argument, and social evolution over a millennia. When we look into history, we see that other cultures have had a few different ideas for what marriage was and what the rules were. However, only a scant handful of these configurations actually survived and thrived. So you have monogamous marriage, and you have female monogamous marriages, i.e. such as in Islam, where the man can marry multiple women in war, and in war take unmarried slaves if he wants as sexual partners. Some early pagan European cultures had much in common with this and functioned in a similar way, though none survived far beyond the tribal period, such that the practice was retained into post-tribal societies after that. The most enduring and successful configuration to date has been that which has been between one man and one woman. But why one man and one woman? It is very exclusive, and the very notion of exclusive relationships seems to be under constant attack by progressives and others in society in recent years. For all that, by any measure, it appears to have been the most successful foundation we have to create happy and well-balanced children. The why, as to it being one man and one woman, seems obvious biologically. After all, that is all you need in order to reproduce children, so the efficiency is there. A man can sire children with as many women at once, and a woman only needs a man's input on the matter for a moment before he is no longer required for nature to take its course and the child to be born. Biologically, that is the case, but a pregnant woman is to a degree or other incapacitated to some extent by the process, some far more than others. For many, the process can be entirely incapacitating for a long time, perhaps even after childbirth itself. So why not have it so a woman has multiple male lovers to help her? And if not, why should they be sexually exclusive? Well, the answer is fatherless children. That is also why the one man, multiple women type of marriage could theoretically work on some level, and occasionally does for some. But in general, it causes its own problems for a variety of reasons, because such families are rare and over time appear to be less stable than traditional families. Women too have their biological imperative, possibly due to innate rivalries, tensions, or emotional need. But it's quite hard to find actual data concerning why is the case, possibly because in the West, these relationships tend to be illegal in many countries, but also because there are just not really that many of them. Things are also changing a great deal because of modern medicine and medical practice. There were no paternity tests in the Neolithic, but a father having some surety about the origin of his offspring is important. Countless studies have shown. The reason that this is a problem is because men, naturally, do not wish to care and provide for another man's offspring in general. It can be done, and is done very well by a huge number of dedicated stepfathers around the world. However, it is not ideal for most men, and there is evidence to suggest that men resist caring and providing for children who are not proven to be his own. It is quite logical in terms of the biology. Biology drives us to compete, to pass down our own DNA and genes. But there are exceptions to this, and some men have stronger biological input than others, but we are talking in very broad terms here. Marriage is a way in which society can eliminate this problem by pairing the men and women up and preventing either party of this pair, especially the woman, from mating with a person outside this pair. And this is what hundreds of generations of different humans from manifold societies all over the world across history have determined to be the best, most effective solution to this problem. On paper, this means that at least most children, if not every child born, hopefully, you would think would be the offspring of their mother's husband, and therefore the problem of fatherless children is solved, at least as far as we can. So why do we now, in recent years, behave like all that hard-won wisdom of thousands of years is now unworthy of acknowledgement in the face of progressive ideology that suits only the political expediency of the moment? Fatherless children are themselves demonstrably at a disadvantage in comparison to children raised in a traditional family setting. This is just a well-documented fact. Young girls require a masculine figure in their lives in order to formulate a healthy, non-sexualized conception of masculinity as a counterpoint to their sexualized conception of it, and certainly the less than helpful societal pressures that we have today. You only have to look at the disturbing trend among young women today of calling their sexual partners daddy to understand what I mean. The rise in enormous size of social media sites dedicated to pairing up girls and women with older, wealthier men for financial benefit of the damage done when society starts to undermine the value of family and begins to dismantle the moral definition with which people view the world and relationships. Boys and young males benefit greatly from a positive role model figure in their lives in order to understand how one can be a man without being a thug or being feminine. I would add that it is not impossible for men to do this without a father figure. It's just very, very much more difficult. And even men with bad fathers at least have an example of one not to be, though that is hardly the outcome any of us want. But regardless of gender or orientation, children benefit from unconditional love and security. Of course, this can be achieved as well outside of a traditional family, but demonstrably leading to less predictable and less optimal outcomes in that situation. If anything, these trends have become more and more obvious over time as traditional families suffer more and more disintegration for a variety of reasons. I fully recommend that anyone who thinks fatherless children are not disadvantaged to look up the official statistics on it. You'll find everything positive, like living longer, lower stress levels, getting a degree, earnings, general health is greater amongst the children of married parents. The likelihood of jail and of criminal behaviour is less likely, and in fact almost every negative outcome, including becoming an addict, being homeless, getting diabetes, is more likely for people from single-parent families. But none of this is actually easy to say. It's a difficult subject to talk about on many levels. The job most single parents do is utterly heroic in most cases, and I have nothing but admiration for those I know. What those of us involved in this article really are trying to say is that both parents bring more to the safety, security, and nurture of children than just the genetic contribution alone, and it seems ridiculous to pretend otherwise given the data. As the statistics do not differentiate between households where it is only the mother or only the father present, it's not seemingly possible to tell if there is a difference based upon which parents are the most prevalent carer in a single-parent situation, so that would have been interesting to know. But these statistics do take into account wealth background, so it isn't just because poorer families are more likely to find themselves becoming single-parent families that seems to affect the ultimate outcomes for the children. On a one-for-one basis, outcomes appear to be equally suboptimal, with equivalence in terms of their negative implications for the parents of both wealthier and poorer families. We could find no study at all that suggests that divorce or ending up in a single-parent family situation can lead to an equivalent or better outcome for children. And given the rates of divorce and increasingly sneering obsession among progressives to denigrate the traditional family, this should be receiving far more attention. Sadly, broken families can be vulnerable and may experience other secondary risk factors. Data shows that step-parents are not always a safe alternative to a blood-related parent. The statistical fact is that the children of step-parents are significantly more likely to experience abuse, be it verbal, physical, or sexual, than biological children. It turns out that the old trope of many an old tale and countless Disney movies were probably onto something, tapping into wisdom learned over a couple of thousand years. Though it should be said that on balance, a child in a family with one blood-related parent and one step-parent is statistically better off than a child in a single-parent family, even if that parent is blood related. But there is statistically significant risk associated with that, which also has to be considered. Earlier in the article, when talking of anthropology and the development of marriage as a foundation for raising children in a bonded one male, one female unit, we mentioned that this was a societal mechanism preventing either party of this pair, especially the woman, from mating with a person outside the pair. Also pointing out that, for biological reasons, this must necessarily focus on the woman's needs in particular due to the physical requirements of childbirth. Though this also can extend to the time thereafter, as anyone who has raised children and taken care of babies will know. It is a hard and demanding time. Though good fathers can do all they can to be as supportive as possible, there may be some things we just cannot do, such as breastfeeding, despite what some lunatics on the far left might be trying to tell us. But then again, these are the same people that cannot actually answer the question, what is a woman to begin with? So I think we can probably disregard them, along with the flat earthers. But this onus on the woman may be far more fundamental even than that, embedded deep into our primitive mind and instincts. We are driven to survive and pass on our genes to the next generation, as is every animal on this planet. So one of the reasons that the institution of marriage and the one man and woman unit is so successful is because it supports that deep-seated biological imperative. A woman who sleeps with a man other than her husband is setting her husband up to raise a child which is not his own. It is bringing the child into a potentially higher risk situation built on a less stable foundation, thereby increasing the risk of suboptimal outcomes for the child before it was even born. A man who sleeps with a woman who is not his wife does not put his wife in the same situation, but still puts the marriage at grave risk in most cases, thereby increasing the chances of a poor outcome for any existing children. In this article, we're not really going into the morality of the entire situation at any great length. Instead, we're trying to focus on the question, why do people get married, and what purpose does it serve? So we are really looking at what societal problem it solved. That is not to ignore the moral argument entirely, as the morality of the issue has evolved to support the biological and social need for some mechanism resulting in a pair bond. Bringing up children is resource intensive, and there has to be a way to ensure some sort of commitment. Obviously, the result of a failure to abide by what is essentially at its heart a contract between two people is usually far less stability in the pair bond itself, which increases the likelihood of a poor outcome for the child. So yes, putting a child in such a situation would seem to be highly immoral in many different ways, regardless of gender. The number of men that are believed to be raising a child that is not their own and do not know it is deeply disturbing. It is believed that in America alone, there are at least 1 million fathers that are bringing up a child that they are completely unaware is not their own. That is 3.7% of fathers with children under 18 in the United States alone. The effect on the children and fathers when this comes to light is absolutely devastating. Surely this is one of the worst things that one person could ever do to another. It denies some fathers the chance to ever have their own biological children, and it harms children irrevocably. It is not exaggeration to say that this is something that can totally destroy the offspring of any age and puts them into a situation that they will never get over. It affects almost every aspect of life for some victims, and sadly, often leads to depression and even suicide. In some countries, this is now becoming known as paternity fraud, and many legislators have been looking at how such a serious crime should be treated appropriately. However, paternity fraud really only looks at the financial implications of the situation, so it's become more broadly termed paternal discrepancy, or PD. This term is supposed to more broadly refer to a difference between that which a man has been led to believe and biological fact. However, this term almost seems like an attempt to sanitize a truly evil act, which must be dealt with all the appropriate seriousness of the judicial system. Anyone who's ever seen the outcome of PD, intentional or otherwise, will tell you that it has been one of the most deeply destructive things that they have ever witnessed. Unfortunately, it also seems to be on the rise. Or perhaps, as has been said by many commentators, is it just the range and access to medical treatments, genetic testing, and now genetic medicines that are exposing the scale of the problem? Perhaps it was not just that many religions suggested that female promiscuity was a bad idea to oppress women, but to provide some wisdom based upon countless generations of experience and social evolution. If women are conditioned by society to be cautious and more controlled in their sexuality, then even if men can express their sexuality openly, they can't act on any promiscuity. This helps both genders to remain focused upon the task of raising children. Could it be then that it's not the intent of religions such as Christianity to oppress women, but to provide a guide to best practice and act as a framework for creating a stable society by itself creating a sort of moral compass? To bring this back to anthropology slightly, which usually treats societies like animals in a great Darwinian death match, it is not hard to see why societies which bring men into child rearing by trying to guarantee the children they raise are their own, by stifling female promiscuity, fared better on the tides of time than those that let everyone do their own thing, having not established moral and societal norms. Imagine a society where women and children are held in common among the men. There are no families, just women with litters of their own children. A society with essentially no commitments. That quickly spirals out of control and leads us back to chaos. The state of mankind prior to all societal evolution. Let's say we were to try some sort of communal child rearing experiment, where every child is taught that all men are their fathers. Very few of these male figures would invest any significant resources into those children at all, to the extent that children need significant resources of every type. One could probably predict that if they did, it is likely to curry favour with the mother, and we have a word for that sort of transactional arrangement: prostitution. Something we do see in the wild among apes, our closest biological counterparts. And one can imagine not too dissimilar to our nature prior to millennia of social evolution. So why the highly misnamed progressives actually try to regress back to a pre-social evolution kind of society? There is significant scientific evidence to support this. In 2003, researchers at the State University of New York at Albany conducted a study where they took a group of equal male and female test subjects and then morphed their facial features with photographs of children. Testing showed that the female group responded equally to photos of children whose faces resembled their own and those that resembled the faces of a stranger. However, when it came to the results from the male group, men reacted far more positively to faces which resembled their own. Study author, PhD Rebecca Birch, concluded, men throughout the history of the species who have invested all their time and energy in children who are not theirs no longer have genes in the population. Think about that. That is an incredibly powerful biological trigger. That is the difference between genetic extinction and success from an evolutionary perspective. It is the very core of what drives a species, and the stakes are as high as it gets. And this is why the results of parental discrepancy are so totally psychologically devastating, particularly for men and children. Marriage is held as sacred in many religions for this reason. It protects us and society in general from devastating consequences. In essence, it is a key bulwark against increasing chaos. Is it not time to wake up and realize that the traditional family unit was not something we arrived upon by accident? Marriage is the fundamental means we have of codifying something that was best for us, best for society, and supports us in successfully raising the next generation. The Bible treats marriage with reverence, not because it is trying to oppress anyone. It clarifies and provides definition to something that we needed to enshrine in law so much that we could only entrust it to a higher power. That is how important it was to our ancestors and remains so to this day. Those who want to tear down valuable and hard-won learning based upon thousands of years of human evolution are dicing with a type of de-evolutionary regressive chaos. These people are like anchors, calling themselves progressive but doing nothing more than trying to drag us back into chaos despite the thousands of years of learning upon which structures of society and order have been built. This then, the raising of children in a successful way, was far more difficult for society without the institution of marriage. Indeed, I'd go even further, especially for those married in a religious context. It is the most ultimate and binding of contracts for very good reasons. We look forward to you joining us on the next one. Have a good week. Of course, huge numbers of people have no interest or at times option to have biological children, but they also choose to get married. This demonstrates their ultimate commitment to each other and also serves to stabilise societies. A significant proportion of these may also choose to adopt children, providing a stable home to children who have been unfortunate enough to have lost their parents for whatever reason. In many countries, it is a requirement to be married before one can be considered for adoption, because of the greater stability and commitment that it suggests. Furthermore, married couples, regardless of children, are far less likely to split up than unmarried partnerships. This stabilises not only their lives, but society in general. It further strengthens their bond by demonstrating their commitment to one another, and gives the union increased authority as a result. Suddenly, sexual relationships outside of that pair bond are not just having fun, they're breaking the ultimate commitment that one can make. I think one could reasonably argue that the commitment made between married couples without children also serves to protect children in societal terms. It reduces the chances of infidelity in a population and the societal harm that can cause in general, especially to those families where children are likely to be affected as a result. So that commitment which they made, even having, for whatever reason, having not had children themselves, also serves to support society and particularly children. It is the ultimate, the greatest, the most serious commitment to another person that a human being can ever make. Thank you for listening to the Supreme Leader podcast in August 2022. We do hope you join us for the next one. If you have any comments, please do contact us via the website. We would love to hear from you.